What's up, everyone? Thank you for joining today on the first episode of the Infosec Sidekick podcast. This podcast is going to be all about, figuring out where you are in your career in cybersecurity, exploring, different paths that maybe you were thinking about in your career, and just focusing a lot on, you know, nurturing happiness in your life in cybersecurity and um, just trying to find your way in that sense. So with that being said, there's going to be a lot of hiccups. It's our first episode, I'm sure. So please bear with us. And I think both of us here, myself and Matt, really hope that you get some value out of this conversation. So first off, I'm Travis. I'm the host and kind of creator of this concept of Infosec Sidekick, and it's really supposed to be about you being the hero of your career. And as cheesy as that sounds, um, you know I'm really just here to host conversations that bring value in some way to help you take something to the next level. So with that being said, I want to welcome our very first guest, Matt Williams. He has been kind enough to come on here and be the guinea pig for the first episode here. So Matt, take it away. You have any opening words?
Yeah, just thanks for having me on, and I look forward to 2-3 years looking back at this conversation and kind of seeing where it all started for the podcast and where it goes in the future and how it changes over time. So looking forward to having this conversation, and especially because I have a lot of conversations with people about careers and finding joy in it and all of that. And I think this is a good way to share with a broader audience.
Awesome, man. Yeah, I think you and I are really on the same page when it comes to that. We haven't known each other for that long. We kind of just crossed paths very briefly, and you've been a huge supporter of, just some of the, new content I've been producing, and I really, really appreciate that. So Matt, you work in sales. So this might be a little bit of an odd direction that some people might not be expecting for the first episode of the Infosec Sidekick podcast. Can you tell me a little bit about just maybe what you do for a living?
Yeah, no, absolutely happy to get into that. And I think salespeople, when we're doing the right things, maybe we kind of are like the InfoSec sidekick. So I think it is appropriate from that perspective. We're supposed to be helping out our partners. So I'm in sales right now. I've worked for a number of companies. As of today, I'm with Ping Identity, and I focus on partnering with large accounts in Southern California, specifically the Fortune 1000, to help them solve challenges, whatever those may be. And for some companies, they've had those challenges solved, and so maybe we're not as relevant. Some customers, they're using us, and so we're figuring out how they can further use us to solve challenges. And then some companies are exploring and trying to figure out how to solve challenges that we typically solve. So I kind of view my role as a problem solver at the end of the day.
Nice. Yeah. So take me a little bit, further back. I think there's a lot of people in cybersecurity, especially since it's getting harder to say this, but it's a newer discipline, right? Time goes on, and it seems to be getting more mature. But a lot of the leaders in the industry have very different backgrounds. They weren't necessarily looking to get into cybersecurity. So maybe you can tell everyone a little bit about, your college experience and what you thought you were going to be doing, and how you kind of pivoted your first made your first pivot into the sales world.
Yeah, sure. Good question. I'll actually go a little bit further than I shared last time when we chatted. So going back to freshman in college, my major was declared as business. And I was kind of thinking about it, and I was like, both my parents majored in business. My mom is in technology sales. My dad is in healthcare. He's a healthcare broker, which is sales, and an uncle, all in technology sales. My perspective was, want to do something different. I want to create my own path. And so I switched from business to civil engineering, went through 4 years of that, suffering through difficult math at 2 a.m. multiple times throughout those 4 years. And then my senior year of college, I was looking for income as a normal college student would. And I found out that we had a position selling advertising in our school newspaper in the Gonzaga Bulletin. And so I found out someone that worked there, bought him Chipotle, found out all the interview questions beforehand so I'd have a good interview, and got a position there, and ended up being their top salesperson all time at that point. So I was like, when I graduated, I was kind of like, shoot, I'm kind of good at this sales thing. I enjoy it. I was selling advertising. I didn't feel like I could be called to that long term. I still kind of had that engineer in me that liked problem solving. And then I had a family member that was in cybersecurity that was talking to me about it. And my perspective on cybersecurity at the time was it's Norton or McAfee or Trend Micro antivirus for personal computers, like really, really minimal understanding. And then, found a cybersecurity company with an entry level role and applied. And I felt like that'd be a good match between the sales skills that I had and I enjoyed and the social aspect of it. And then also the technical, it's an industry that's always changing. There's a lot of problems to be solved. So it kind of matched that engineering side as well. So went from a civil engineer with, selling advertising in a school newspaper to entry level cybersecurity sales. Because I think we talked about this last time. I didn't feel like I had the computer or the technical know-how to get into be a cybersecurity practitioner, but sales, you don't maybe need to have as much technical expertise. There's other knowledge that you can gain and understand. I feel like that'd be a good match for me.
Nice. So yeah, really, really interesting. I think there's some commonalities and like a pretty, besides maybe the civil engineering degree, there was, a relatively clear path forward for you. You identified your ability to sell, first and foremost, and then kind of combined that maybe with a little bit of an interest and, a little birdie in your ear telling you, hey, the cybersecurity thing's pretty cool.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool, man. I think there's a lot of kind of like unspoken success that maybe might be too hard to get into right now, but might be worth talking about. Like, you just become the top seller, right? Like what do you think some of the things were that made you a top seller?
Yeah. So I'd probably attribute it to two things. One, as I mentioned, my family was in sales. So, I've been sitting on conference calls since I was 3 years old. So when I was first interviewing, they're kind of like, you don't really have any experience. I'm like, well, actually, I have 18 years of experience secretly. I kind of have that perspective. So I kind of had a decent understanding at a high level, at least, to be a professional. And then the second piece was a really attempt to focus on solving a problem. Like my perspective is like a lot of people, I guess I should say, a lot of people, their perspective in sales is it's about bringing you money. And my perspective is there's a commission that comes with a sale, but that's a side effect to solving a problem. So I treat the financial aspect of it as a side effect, and I focus on what is the problem that we're trying to solve. So on whose problems can I solve, really educating myself on that, doing the research beforehand so I'm not showing up and not looking like I know anything. But I really kind of take that outward focus on whoever I'm working with. And I think that just led to a lot of success because, hey, what's the problem we're solving? Is it a big enough problem that you're willing to spend on it? Yes or no? If no, that's okay. We're not solving a problem that's meaningful. Yes, okay, let's talk about how that can work. So I think that's kind of what has led to my success, throughout my career so far and continues to do so.
Yeah, and it sounds like, I mean, just to summarize a little bit, it sounds like, you know, and this is just a general probably life tip, right? Like where you really you're more successful when you focus on the right part of something, right? Like we can all
Right.
focus on getting the quick dollar, especially within cybersecurity. Like it's really easy to to fixate on that. But that's a really fast way to A, find unhappiness quickly, and B, just generally not perform as well in your role. And it sounds to me like maybe that was one of the things that you identified early on that made you, a successful salesperson. Because, like, let's not kid ourselves. I think a lot of cybersecurity people and tech people, and just problem solvers in general, which are the people you're working with, have a really good, BS radar when it comes to being able to detect that stuff, right? And
Yeah.
I'm sure we could talk about that a lot because you interface with that every day. It's a stigma that you have to overcome every day. Um, but but yeah, I think that was a really really insightful thing that whoever's listening can really try and internalize, to be successful.
Yeah. And I think the piece I'll add to that is, sitting on your side as a practitioner or somebody who's maybe a buyer, it's really hard initially to separate like who's there to help me and who's there just from their own selfish financial perspective. And so it is on myself or other salespeople to find a way to break through and say like, hey, I really am trying to help you, and like here's how I'm going to prove it, add value, here's insights for you. So you have to focus on that, kind of just keep putting in that effort.
Right. So one of the questions I had for you that is just me being a little ignorant, to the sales world, but I often see reference to inside versus outside sales. Is that something
Hmm.
you can illuminate for me a little bit? And where do you live?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. Right now, I think we all technically are in inside sales because we're all inside the house in this COVID era. But in general, yeah, inside sales is about you come into an office every day, a desk, and you're not going outside and meeting with clients. Whereas outside sales, you're going out face to face, meeting with clients. Um, and if anyone's listening to this, like making that jump from inside to outside sales is usually the hardest jump to make in a career, besides maybe breaking in, not necessarily from a skills perspective, but just from a perception perspective. If you're a great inside salesperson, hiring managers don't necessarily think that you will be a great outside sales person. So there's a lot of perks to it. You get to meet with people and work more closely with more interesting companies that are solving more interesting challenges. But making that jump can definitely be challenging.
So is the jump from inside to outside considered a career progression in inside sales, or are they kind of like two equal playing fields from like a career
It
advancement space?
Sure. I'd say generally it's viewed as that. I think it goes organization by organization, but I'd say like there's organizations where the inside sales role is considered kind of the premier career progression. You start with the outside sales. But I'd say if I had to guess, especially in technology, I'd say in 80% of organizations, you make a jump from an inside sales role to an outside sales role.
Right. And we'll talk about this a little bit later, but just kind of to hint at this, whether or not you enjoy travel and such might play a big role in which one you prefer too, right? So, and
Yeah,
quality of life and all that kind of stuff.
yeah, absolutely. I think the inside sales role probably does a little bit better job of keeping their workload to 40 hours a week. So there's certainly perks that come with it.
Nice. All right. Let's pivot a little bit. So I know we didn't really, maybe there's a little bit of a gap that we didn't talk about in your career where you kind of, went from, breaking into kind of the cybersecurity sales space to get to where you are now. But just to color that for people, I don't think we need to focus on it too much. But Matt's working for a pretty large organization, well known in the industry, and he's doing inside sales there. And worked your way up, man. I think just looking at it, I'm impressed by that. And um, I don't know. Is there anything else you wanted to say on that before we moved on there?
As far as the career progression piece,
Yeah, I mean, is there anything in there that you think that viewers might benefit from, like where you were transitioning, how
Yeah.
you framed yourself. I don't know, anything there.
Yeah. So I think the comment I'll add on is you kind of said like there's kind of an impressive career progression. I think you see that externally, but what might be missed is, I think for every promotion I got, there was about 10 rejections that came with it to other similar roles. So it's not something that's necessarily easy. And I think at the end of the day, you need to find someone that's willing to believe in you and bet on you to make that jump. And you have to take away their reasons that they may not want to promote you, make it really hard for them to say no. And there's ways you can do that around picking just a logical choice. So understand that career progression, it comes with, it's not just a straight up path. It's kind of a stock chart. Although that's kind of an interesting analogy to use in
Yeah,
these
yeah,
times.
yeah. Seriously. All right, man. Thank you for that. So let's jump into, um, you know, something that I was thinking that was kind of interesting, which is sales in the cybersecurity world versus the not cybersecurity world. You know, I don't know if there's any other interesting way to say that, but um, people who are watching this have an interest in cybersecurity and may, you know, so I want to keep it on that topic, but obviously there are probably 8,000 times more generic sales positions with companies that aren't necessarily focused on cybersecurity, and arguably, you know, the ones that are out there that are big names are, dual factored. There's some cybersecurity components, there's just general development components. Um, but talk to me a little bit about, I mean, having been in advertising and all that kind of stuff, what are some of like the differences, if any, of working within a sales team that's focused more around cybersecurity?
Yeah. So a number of things come to mind. One, there's all these different kind of sales disciplines. There's large sales groups around medical devices, around prescription medication, around advertising, to your point, technology in general, cybersecurity within technology, and then a number of groups with under technology as well. I kind of think what's different about cybersecurity is you can't really talk about it as much. I was joining this kind of social media site specifically for sales, and it said, who have you worked with, who are your references, who have you sold to. I'm kind of like, I've worked at a number of different companies, and I'm sure it's possible for someone to research what those companies are using and what I've sold to them in the past, but it's also kind of sensitive information. So I can't really promote myself in that way of who I've worked with and what businesses I work with, and references can be a little bit more challenging to get compared to other industries because of the sensitivity of what we're doing. I think the next challenge from a cybersecurity perspective is you talk to people that have salespeople that have a cybersecurity component within their portfolio. Like if it's a Microsoft, they have cybersecurity solutions, or Google now has cybersecurity solutions under their cloud unit. AWS has cybersecurity solutions, and there's consulting companies that sell cybersecurity as well as IT consulting. Typically, I can't give you the why behind this, but there seems to be this general feedback that it's harder to connect with a CISO than a CIO. I don't know if that's because of security practitioners in general are more risk adverse, if it's because cybersecurity has worse salespeople in general, so they're wanted to be avoided. But for whatever reason, it's harder to get in front of security practitioners than other technology practitioners. It's kind of the feedback I get. But as far as the benefits, I mean, I've talked about it. I think you're solving really interesting problems. I like being able to say, hey, we power this app and we help make it more secure, and we hopefully prevent breaches. There's kind of an exciting mission behind that as well, as opposed to we sell advertising and get more exposure. Some people love that. For me, I feel like I need a stronger mission to tie to. So there's pros and cons to everything, but those are some of the ones that kind of stand out to me.
Yeah. I mean, it makes a lot of sense. Obviously, me working on internal cybersecurity teams throughout my career, you know, you always want to be careful with, even posting a job requirement, like just putting, hey, we have, Q radar and, these are our firewalls and this and that. Like, to a certain degree, that stuff is easy enough to find out, but you need to be cognizant about, what you're putting out there. You got to careful about versioning, because all of those things have like suddenly have vulnerability context around it, right? And it's the same thing, it sounds like, in sales. um, but yeah, interesting little nuances there. Um, so correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like you've worked for fairly large organizations or well-established organizations, um, throughout, your cybersecurity sales career.
Yeah, so it's a little bit deceptive. So my first company was a startup, but they were
Oh,
acquired by Semantic under Broadcom. So when you go to my LinkedIn, it says Broadcom, so it looks like large company. And then I was working with Semantic, and then they were acquired by Broadcom. So Broadcom has been a large theme in my life, and that's when I left around the same time. And then after that, I found myself at Ping, which is about 1,000 employees. So I've kind of had that nice perspective around, this is what a 100 employee company looks like. This is what 1,000 employee company looks like, and this is what I think Semantic was 16,000 employees or so companies at the time. So good breadth
wow.
across those.
Interesting. So yeah, I actually was expecting you to just answer yes to my question, and then so I was totally wrong, which is actually kind of nice, because what I was trying to get at is there is, within the cybersecurity community of, practitioners, engineers, and analysts, and everything in between, there is such a big difference between working for a startup and working for, some sort of well-established organization. Even if, one of the things I can think of, the team sizes may not even be that different, right? Like, sure, there are companies
Yeah,
that have hundreds of people on their cybersecurity, inside cybersecurity team. But there's also just as big companies that have, three people working in a SOC, grinding away, protecting the gold. But there is still like 100% that, more rounded person, potentially more just generally like super smart type of people that I've seen that just tend to like gravitate towards the startup world. And just for clarification, I have no experience there. I did take like a foray into exploring that, and it was like a whole different world to me. So, you know, is it the same in sales? And like, what's the general feeling, between you and your colleagues about, what it means to work for a startup or a smaller organization, opposed to kind of jumping right into the big guns?
yeah, no, that's a good question. I was actually talking about this with a industry mentor on Thursday or Friday, so a day or two ago. And our kind of perspective was, put us in a startup, we'll do fine. Put us in a large company, we'll do fine. There's pros and cons to each, and I'll talk about those in a second. But we also have noticed that there's people that, like, we want to do pre-IPO startups 2 years from, going to IPO, about 500,000 people company. There's people that we just want to do the largest companies out there. And there's people that are like, I want to take early stage startup. It might take 8 years to IPO or get bought out by someone, but I think it could be very lucrative if we do that. So kind of see people choose their expertise and their specialty, just kind of like cybersecurity, like, hey, I'm good at this. And then you see people that maybe have skills that translate across all of those. As far as kind of the differences, small company, typically nimbler, can develop faster. I remember my first company, there's a customer that needed a requirement, and we pumped it out in a month. And there's, when I say requirement, I should say a list of requirements. And I think there's about 40 of them. So be able to develop 40 requirements over a month,
Like into
it's
the
pretty quick.
product?
And like into the product, like, yeah, set out a major release pretty quickly. But generally, not necessarily my company, not necessarily other companies, but generally the processes are less defined than that they are at large companies, because large companies rely on processes to make things happen. They can't scale otherwise. So you go to a large company and they might have better processes in place, but maybe they're not as nimble. And so there's components around that, and it's kind of like, here's what I have today, and if that doesn't fit with what you need, like, I can't really do anything about that unless you're willing to wait for, either something's coming out soon or it's coming out a year later, hopefully, right? So there's that component, but there's also the brand component. When you're with a smaller company, nobody's ever heard of you. I think there's 4,000 vendors or something like that. Like, a lot of people clamoring for different companies' times. So with that, like, you don't have that brand and the weight, so you really need to focus on the problem solving aspect and really understand what you solve. Whereas when you're with a large brand, you can kind of throw the weight of the brand behind you and say, hey, I'm when I was with Semantic, hey, I'm Semantic, which everybody had an opinion on Semantic. Sometimes good, sometimes bad, but everybody had an opinion because it was a large brand. So those are kind of some of the perspectives that I gained there.
Yeah, and let's not kid ourselves. Having a perspective on a brand means they know it by name. So it sounds
Right.
to me like that's a big thing, right? Like, where some people might enjoy the grind of, like, trying to, hook the big fish, or trying to, build repertoire with people. And I think you have to do that anyway. But it's kind of the difference maybe between an organization approaching you versus you approaching an organization, right? Like, I don't know if this is true or not, but you might get opportunities that come through the pipeline because someone Googled or heard from a colleague that, a company that you work for had done really well for them in the past, or, it's the top result on Google because your company invests a lot in that, you know, versus, yeah, I don't know who you are. I don't trust you at all. Like, I don't have time for a demo, like, I guess I would imagine that those are two different types of people, who can thrive in those environments.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of truth in what you said, because Semantic, when I was there, were leaders in Gartner Magic Quadrants and Forrester Waves, and I think 5 or so technologies. So sometimes you get people that call you up and say, I have a project around data loss prevention, and I see Semantic is number 1, and we're going to look at 1, 2, and 3 and understand what's the best fit for us. Whereas Bay Dynamics, the first company I was with, there wasn't a Magic Quadrant at the time, so had to be really specific around, these are the top 3 problems we solve for your industry and for your peers. Do you find this relevant? So yeah, I think you're spot on there.
Nice. All right, man. Well, I think I think that's just been a really good perspective. I think I've learned a lot about just sales in general, and kind of how you've gone through that process, and some of the nuances there. I wanted to take a pivot a little bit, because this is something that I think is really important to focus on nowadays, on this podcast and just everywhere. But that's the career lifestyle, and how it kind of also combines in with mental health aspects of just every day dealing with the struggles and the upsides and the downsides. So maybe we could just, I think we had planned on maybe talking about those things separately, but it might make more sense to flow back and forth between those things. And so I want us to start with you know the just the sales lifestyle, right? So I think one of the first things I think about when, as someone who has never done it before and who has worked with various salespeople, I think we always go right to the commission. Um, it's the easiest thing to latch onto, in terms of, like, the little, the worm on the end of the fishing hook. Like, oh wow, that sounds really interesting. You make money if you perform well, even though a lot of people in our industries have that in the form of, like, a bonus or something like that. But the idea of a commission is just super exciting to some people, because the sky is potentially the limit. Like, I don't know if there's limits on that stuff, but I mean, if you for some reason just had, like, the most ridiculous quarter or year, I mean, you could find yourself someplace ridiculous. So, I mean, maybe you can kind of illuminate that whole part of your life a little bit, like we're not going into details or anything, but just like, what's that all about in
Sure,
sales?
sure. So I think that's part of one of the things that attracted me to sales in the first place. Like if I do well, I get rewarded, and there's a direct correlation to how I do in certain metrics. And if I don't do well, then I don't do as well. And so I kind of have a control of my own destiny. And like I said, it is a side effect of focusing on solving problems, because I don't think you can be effective otherwise. But typically in a sales role, you have a base, and as you work your way up, that becomes more and more over time. And then you have a commission amount, which is if you close X dollars, you get Y dollars. And it's typically a 50-50 split. So if you close X dollars, you typically get the amount of Y, which is equal to your base. And so, but a number of companies, they don't cap commission. So, there are salespeople that have a great year and they earn 7 figures. And some companies I've heard occasionally of 8 figures. So it can be really lucrative. That's not the norm. But it is out there, and that option is out there. There's a lot of interesting conversations out there around salespeople talking about maybe we should get rid of commission structures and just go to salary. But I personally like it. So I mean that's a whole nother topic at the same time. So
Yeah.
from a sales perspective and the commission side, I just like how it translates to your results and that piece of it.
Right. So, yeah, I mean, like, I'm almost tempted to compare it to, but not really to like a waiter's salary, like you make a little less on the hourly, but, you know, performing well will equal more. And obviously, I don't think that's a really good analogy. I don't know, but like as you move up, the base might become more of a living wage. I don't know. Is there an expectation people should have maybe to where if they're just trying to get into sales or they're a little more junior that um, you know, like I've heard of commission only positions. I've heard of, you know, I guess what I'm trying to say is if someone's looking to get into cybersecurity sales, I mean, should they be
Yeah.
prepared to sacrifice a little bit on their lifestyle until they can build that experience and, not really rely on that commission to supplement their income?
Yeah, I think there's a lot to unpack there, and some of it's based on opinions. I'll share some of my own. I personally think the waiter analogy is a good example, and I'll kind of add to it. If you're a waiter at like a higher end restaurant, a 3 Michelin star restaurant, there's going to be more expected out of you, but you're going to get more from like a tips perspective and the people you're working with. And so I kind of think about, as you're a salesperson, think about what kind of restaurant you're working at and what kind of financial aspect comes out of that. As far as breaking in and getting in, it kind of depends where you start. There's individuals that have been practitioners for some time, and so because they have that practitioner experience, they might be hired as a sales engineer with a base that gets them to a point where they're pretty comfortable. As far as someone starting out of college, again, if you're in technology and you're in cybersecurity, at least, you're usually in a good spot from like someone that's out of college. I'll kind of put it that way. Like you can pay your rent. Maybe you need some roommates. You probably wouldn't be supporting someone. You probably want to be supporting a wife and 2 kids in Southern California buying a house from an entry level
Right.
perspective. But if you're making that transition and you have other experience, you don't necessarily need to start in an entry level role. As far as the 0% commission, there's people that do that, and they get the opportunity to be rewarded more because there's less liability for the company. So they usually get a higher percentage of the deals that they close. And for some people that works great. Like I think when I talked about someone who I know that got 8 figures in a year, they were on a 0% commission plan.
Oh, interesting.
But you're on a 0% commission plan. So
Could have
things
ended
are dry
worse,
for
right?
6 months. Yeah, it could have ended worse. So, there's different kind of pros and cons of each of those. And It just kind of depends on your personality. I have a wife and 2 girls, and so I don't ever want to be in the point where I feel like I have to close a deal to pay rent, because then that influences my perspective as a problem solver. I'm not necessarily solving your problem anymore. I'm solving my problem. And so I try to stay away from that for that reason.
Man, that is so interesting how that kind of comes full circle, right? Like, in the beginning, we were talking about how one of your primary advantages and like key strengths is the ability to separate yourself and really just tackle, hard problems and, not focus on making the sale and just, working more with the person on the other side of the phone or the video and helping them just genuinely trying to solve an issue. But once you start talking about commission and, lifestyle, and if you're oversubscribing there, that advantage becomes less accessible because you have a lot of other things in your life that you maybe need to worry about. So, man, I think that is a really important, like, little nugget you just dropped, and like we kind of unpacked there for people who are thinking about, either making the transition, who are in a place where they haven't, you know, dug themselves into any sort of like, lifestyle position and they're just ready to make a move, or for people coming out of college where you might come out, have a really good year or a quarter, even like very short term, and you go and get that monthly car payment or something like that. Your sales ability, not only like your financial status is at jeopardy at that point, but your ability to execute future sales is actually impacted. I think that's actually really insightful, and something that I hope people listening really take to heart.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that we talked about this last time, like financial freedom and just having flexibility, and that plays into so many things. Like it allows you to really focus on your customers. If you're needed to make a change in your career, it means you don't have to pick the first option that comes to you. It means you can actually pick something that's the right fit. So it just ties into so many things um, in your life.
Sweet, man. So I guess we're approaching the end here, and I really appreciate all the time that you devoted to just having this conversation. And I hope people really found value in just kind of your story and all that kind of stuff. The stuff that you talked about. But um, trying to find a way to kind of just bring it all back to cybersecurity. So forgive me if I talk a little bit here, but if you have anything you want to add, jump in and give your perspective, because I think it's really important. Um, you know, Me personally, I really enjoy, and again, man, we could probably have like 3 episodes of this conversation, because as I think more, we get, maybe to unpack more, but I really enjoy the interpersonal aspect of my career. Even though I have a lot of technical problems to solve and can probably keep my head down, pretty frequently and just bang away at the keyboard. Um, I really, really like talking to people like Matt, to people, just within the organization and solving problems that way. And one of the things that I've thought off and on throughout my entire career is, I always kind of like really make friends with the salespeople I talk to, even if I don't close deals with them. I just, can really relate to the potentially like more extroverted side of their personalities, and even relate to the introverted sides that you get to know through having conversations. And I thought to myself, maybe I would be really happy in a sales role, and kind of putting aside all the stigmas that I had built up throughout the years of just kind of talking to other people who work inside of companies in cybersecurity. Everyone has the dirty, the jokes about the salespeople and stuff, and just kind of like unpacking that all from my head, and really thinking to myself, you know, maybe that would be interesting. And sometimes I still think that, it's it's an option that's on the table for everyone who's not in it right now. Um, you know, m- and and I think it's worth your time if you're sitting somewhere and you're not particularly happy, if there's something missing, if you want more of that, you know, non-technical component to your career, maybe. Um, don't let the stigmas and the other people's opinions really let make you shy away from considering something that could make you really happy. Um, so I'll pause there. I mean, Matt, did you have anything else to add on that?
Yeah, I think just kind of a little bit additional commentary. I was talking to somebody that's thinking about moving from sales to product marketing. We were talking about it, and I think she'd be great. And she kind of had some hesitations because she'd never been in product marketing before. And kind of the conclusion we came to is like, hey, let's not let you get in your own way of trying something out that might be interesting to you. So I think that applies to, if you're a cybersecurity professional and you're in the trenches every day, and there might be some interest in sales, but there might be some trepidation there. But it's worth at least going and exploring and trying it out. And if it doesn't work out for whatever reason, you can always go back to being a cybersecurity professional. So it doesn't stop you from going back to what you're doing. And I always kind of say, and you hear this a lot from a lot of people, like the regrets you usually have are things of omission, things that you don't do. So it's always worth giving it a shot and making sure that you live life with all options explored.
Yeah, man. No, perfect. And I know we didn't really talk about this much, but I really wanted to focus on the last comment here, just being cybersecurity as a career can exist in the sales world, right? Like you get to have those cybersecurity conversations, and if that's the fix you still need, sales is an option. It's not. I didn't want to make this episode about pivoting outside of security into a sales role. It's pivoting from potentially a sale, an analyst position into a cybersecurity sales position, or and not to pigeonhole everyone else, but if you're already in a sales position, maybe taking what Matt said today, about how he progressed and um, some of the skills that he used and honed over that time to get to where he is, like to also build your career up in the cybersecurity space. And I've told Matt, I've told you that, I think just you having experience building solutions out with customers might even qualify you to pivot to, an inside cybersecurity team. If that was really your passion, you have some valid experience there, and I think that's another really interesting conversation to have. And at the end of the day, it's all about, I think it all comes down to what are you the most happy doing and trying to find that and pursue it like with all of your heart to get there. And if we've done nothing else today, I hope we've been able to, you know, maybe inspire someone who's been thinking about this, or help someone in some way who's been thinking about this topic. Um, I know I'm always available um, to help anyone out who's struggling in that area or who wants to know more information. So you can hit me up, obviously on any of my handles on the Infosec Sidekick um, page. I'll obviously link those in the descriptions and all that kind of stuff. And Matt, I don't know if you're in the same boat there, but I just wanted to give you a real quick chance to do a sign off and just get any last words you wanted to say.
Yeah, I think I'll close with similar thoughts with you, which is I really enjoy helping people in their careers. So if you're interested in getting cybersecurity, if you're interested in getting into sales, like I have good expertise in helping people break in because I've taken my own path. So, find me on LinkedIn, bug Travis to figure out how to get a hold of me. I don't plan on disappearing anytime soon. So, yeah, happy to help.
Awesome, man. Well, thank you again, Matt. Show Matt some love in the comments or wherever you want to do it. I'll be posting this, blasting it out across the internet. At some point, this is obviously pre-recorded. So I just want to thank Matt for taking the time out of his day. I know everything's crazy. Well, I don't know. Maybe it's not that impressive because we're all just kind of sitting in our houses anyway. But anyway, that's just a joke. I really appreciate your time, Matt, and thanks so much for being, one of the first guests on our podcast.
Yeah, no, thank you, Travis. Appreciate it.
All right. everyone, I hope you have a wonderful day, and keep tuning back in. Subscribe to the podcast, follow us on LinkedIn, and we'll see you next time.